They slid a heavy white envelope across the table just before the appetizers arrived at my graduation dinner. Inside were legal papers effectively disowning me. I didn't cry, I just smiled, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. They thought they were ending me, but they had no idea that tomorrow morning, when the chief executive officer steps onto the podium and calls my name, the only thing breaking in that auditorium will be their perfect public image. My name is Natalia Perez. I am 27 years old, and in the morning, I will officially be a graduate of the Master of Business Administration program at Cascade University. I live in Seattle, a city of steel, glass, and persistent rain that I've come to prefer over the polished, sun-bleached facades of my family's world. My family, the Merritt Perez conglomerate of Puget Sound, does not operate on love, it operates on formalism, on a brutal ledger of public perception and strategic alliances. My father is Graham Merritt. If you are one of the old money titans living in Medina or the Highlands, you know his name. He is the man they call to make their dynastic wealth quietly multiply. He doesn't just manage money. He curates legacies, ensuring that the right names stay on the right plaques and buildings. My mother, Lydia, complements this perfectly. She doesn't have a job. She has a position. She directs one of the largest and most exclusive charitable foundations in the state, a dazzling machine that turns society galas into tax-deductible showcases of influence. Her charity is the velvet glove on the iron fist of their social standing. And then there is Aubrey, my older sister. Aubrey is the benchmark, the flawless product of their design. She is a corporate attorney at a firm whose nameplate is heavy with consonants and prestige. More importantly, she is engaged to a man from a family that Graham and Lydia refer to in hushed, reverent tones as having the right bloodline. Their union is not a marriage. It is a merger. I am the aberration, the Perez in a family that clings to the Merritt, the one who took a 2-year hiatus after undergrad to work in, of all things, logistics. The one who got her hands dirty in warehouses instead of sculpting them with manicures for boardroom meetings. My MBA was my one concession to them, my attempt to find a language they might understand. They agreed to pay for it, I suspect, only because Cascade University MBA looked good on their theoretical Christmas card. Tonight was meant to be the celebration of this achievement. The restaurant is Maison de Cum. It's the kind of French restaurant where the lights are kept impossibly low and golden, not for romance, but so the clientele, aging in wealth, can look preserved. The air smells of browned butter, old wine, and the faint, acidic tang of Lydia's perfume. We are seated at a round table, the white linen so stiff it could cut you. The smiles are cold. Graham's is a tight, thin line. The smile he gives a fluctuating market. Lydia's is bright, wide, and utterly vacant, her eyes scanning the room for anyone more important she should be talking to. Aubrey's is the worst, a little smirk of condescending pity. Well, Natalia, Graham starts, his voice a low, practiced rumble. You've reached the finish line, as expected. We're very proud of your persistence, Lydia adds, her words like tiny, decorative ice cubes. It's so important to see things through, even when one isn't naturally adept. Aubrey just sips her water, the diamond on her left hand catching the candlelight and flashing it in my eyes. The appetizers have not even been cleared when Graham places a small, rectangular object on the table. It is a heavy crepe envelope, blindingly white, with my full name typed on the front. No congratulations, no, to our daughter, just my name. Before we order the main course, Graham says, your mother and I felt it was important to mark this transition with the appropriate gravity. He slides it across the starched linen. It stops just shy of my bread plate. What is this? I ask, though my voice is perfectly steady. A graduation present, of a sort, Lydia says, her smile tightening. A clarification of your new, independent status. Aubrey's hand, the one not adorned with the merger diamond, subtly raises her phone. The camera is angled toward me. The small red recording light a malevolent dot in the dimness. She is documenting the kill. I pick up the envelope. The paper is thick, expensive, the kind they use for wedding invitations or, I suppose, for this. I slide my finger under the flap. The sound of the paper tearing a small, private scream in the restaurant's curated hush. Inside is a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. It's not stationery. It's legal bond, heavy and official. I unfold it. My eyes scan the text. It's not a letter. It's a document, a legally drafted instrument. There are clauses, whereas, statements, and signatory lines, but I don't need to read the fine print. The 3 words at the top, in bold, capitalized type, are all that matter. We disown Natalia Perez. It states the severance is effective immediately, citing a long, vague list of personal and professional misalignments, and a fundamental divergence from the family's core values. It forfeits any claim I might have to any inheritance, trust, or property. It even revokes my use of the Merritt Family Association, as if it were a country club membership. A faint, sharp sound cuts the air. Ting, ting, ting. It's Lydia, gently tapping her dessert spoon against her water goblet. It's a grotesque parody of a celebratory toast. Aubrey's phone remains perfectly still, capturing my reaction. They are waiting for the explosion. They are waiting for the tears, the screaming, the "how could you?" They have staged this intervention, this execution, in the most public, humiliating way they know how to control. They have built the stage, written the script, and aimed the camera. I look down at the paper, at the clinical black letters that are supposed to annihilate me. I read the final clause, effective immediately upon receipt. So, I look up. I look at Graham, his jaw set in what he believes is strength. I look at Lydia, her face a mask of serene disappointment. I look at Aubrey, her thumb poised over her screen, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of my impending collapse. I do not collapse. I take a breath. I fold the paper, once, twice, 3 times, along its original creases, with precise, careful movements. "Thank you," I say. My voice is clear. It does not tremble. "Thank you for the clarification." I slide the folded document into the inner pocket of my blazer. I can feel the corner of the thick paper press against my ribs. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not give them a single drop of the shame they so desperately ordered. The silence that follows is heavier than the food, than the wine, than the oppressive history of that table. Graham's thin smile wavers. Lydia's fixed expression flickers with confusion. Aubrey's smirk fades, and she slowly, almost imperceptibly, lowers her phone. This was not in their script. My gratitude, my calm, my refusal to perform my own execution, this is a language they do not speak. "Well," Graham says, clearing his throat, the sound unnaturally loud. "Good. We have an understanding." "Yes," I say. "We do." "Now," Lydia chirps, picking up her menu. The crisis of my non-reaction averted in her mind. "Let's decide on the halibut. Aubrey, you must be careful about the photos tomorrow." "Ah, yes, the photos." "Natalia," Lydia says, not looking up from the menu. "You'll be in the front row. Of course, please remember to smile for the cameras when your name is called. We need some good images for the University Alumni Bulletin. It's important for appearances." "Of course," I say. "Appearances." I place my napkin on the table, not crumpled in anger, just folded. "If you'll excuse me," I say, pushing my chair back. The sound of its legs on the polished floor is polite. Final. I have an early start tomorrow. They think I am leaving in shame. They think I am running away to cry in my small studio apartment, to grieve the loss of their gilded cage. They are wrong. I am not running from anything. I am walking out. I am stepping off their stage. I walk through the restaurant, past the tables of golden-lit patrons, past the obsequious host who nods at me, past the heavy oak doors and into the cool, damp Seattle night. The rain is a mist, and it feels like a baptism. I pull out my phone and call a car. I don't look back. As I wait, I see my reflection in the dark glass of the restaurant's front window. My face, framed by the warm, expensive light from inside, is an absolute mask of calm. It is, I realize, a disturbing calm. It is the calm of a navigator who has just confirmed her position, who knows the storm is here, and who is pointing the nose of her ship directly into the waves. My phone buzzes in my hand. It is not them. They will not text. They believe their part in this drama is over. It's a group message from my team, from Leo and Mara, the two brilliant, sleep-deprived engineers who have been in the trenches with me for the last 6 months on my capstone project. The message is from Leo and You Alive. The local tech journal and the Seattle Business Press just emailed. They both want to interview you about the RouteWeave solution. They're calling it disruptive. What do I tell them? The car pulls up, its headlights cutting through the mist. I open the door and slide in, the scent of the restaurant fading, replaced by the clean, neutral smell of the car. I look at the glowing screen. I think about the heavy paper in my pocket. I think about the stage tomorrow. I think about my mother's instruction to smile for the cameras. Oh, I will smile. I type back one single line. Tell them tomorrow will be interesting. Growing up in the Merritt Perez house was not like growing up in a home. It was like being a long-term, non-paying tenant in a museum exhibit dedicated to success. The carpets were white, not beige, not cream, white, an oppressive, brilliant white that was perpetually, impossibly clean, cordoned off by silent rules. We didn't live in that house. We tiptoed through it, careful not to leave a trace of our actual lives. Reputation, in our world, was not an abstract concept. It was a tangible asset, like a stock or a bond, to be managed, curated, and leveraged. It was the sum of two primary things: the incomprehensible, quiet money that Graham managed in his impenetrable portfolios, and the quality of the photographs documenting our perfect, polished lives. The annual Christmas card was not a holiday greeting. It was a corporate branding exercise, planned in July, shot in August, and mailed in November to a list of 500 strategically important people. The gala photos were scanned with the intensity of a stock ticker. Lydia checking for our placement above or below the fold, who we were standing with, the angle of her chin. We were not a family. We were a holding company for the Merritt name, and we were all expected to perform. Our dinner parties were the board meetings. Graham, at the head of the antique refectory table, swirling a wine that cost more than my first car, would hold court with men who owned shipping lines and biotech firms. Lydia, at the other end, was the conductor of optics, a maestro of social leverage. She could steer a conversation away from anything unpleasant, meaning real, human, or unprofitable, and toward her latest charitable acquisition with terrifying, seamless skill. In this theater, my sister Aubrey was the star performer, the gold benchmark against which all assets were measured. Aubrey, Graham would announce, his voice resonating with pride, has just accepted a senior associate position at Kincaid, Strauss, and Meyer, and the table of venture capitalists and surgeons would murmur in approval. This was a language they understood. And Aubrey's fiancé, Lydia would add, her smile radiant, has just been named to the board of the symphony. Their wedding will be at the Olympic Four Seasons. Of course, we've secured the main ballroom for the entire weekend. More approval. This was a successful merger. Then, inevitably, the heavy polished spotlight would swing, by necessity, to me. The energy at the table would instantly drop. And Natalia, Graham would say, his tone shifting from announcement to mitigation. She is finishing her MBA at Cascade. She is focusing on logistics, Lydia would add, the word logistics tasting like ash in her mouth. She'd say it the same way one might say remedial or sanitation. I was the secondary indicator, the artistic one, which in their language was a synonym for unprofitable. I was the variable they couldn't control, the line item that refused to balance. Nothing embodied my unprofitability more than my decision. During the 2-year hiatus I took after undergrad, to take a job at Driftwood Coffee. I couldn't articulate it then, but I was suffocating in the sterile air of their house. I needed to get out, to touch something that wasn't polished, staged, or curated for a photograph. I needed reality. I found it in the steam-filled, chaotic, wonderfully real air of a third-wave coffee shop on a rainy Seattle corner. The smell of burnt espresso, of sour milk, of damp newspapers and the wet wool coats of 1,000 strangers. To me, it was the smell of life, of a system that was messy and functional and immediate. To my mother, it was the smell of absolute, abject failure. "Natalia, must you?" she asked, her nose wrinkled in genuine disgust, after leaning in to kiss my cheek one afternoon. "That smell. It clings. It's acrid. What if someone from the foundation board sees you in an apron?" Graham was more direct. He saw the world as a balance sheet, and I was deep in the red. "It's a line item, Natalia," he told me over a dinner I hadn't earned. "It's not a career. It shows a fundamental lack of focus. You are embarrassing us, and yourself, for minimum wage." But they were wrong. The Merit House taught me about high-stakes presentation. Driftwood Coffee taught me about high-stakes operation. It was my first real classroom. I learned to read people in a way Graham, from his 40th floor office, never could. I learned to see the patterns. The 8:05 a.m. rush of finance bros who needed their triple-shot Americanos in under 45 seconds. Their impatience a palpable, vibrating force. The students who bought one small coffee and needed 4 hours of Wi-Fi and a quiet table, who were buying rent, not a drink. The construction crew at 3 p.m., their boots caked in mud, who didn't want fancy foam art. They wanted a large, hot, black coffee, and they wanted to be called Sir. I wasn't just a barista. I was the human algorithm at the junction of a complex micro-supply chain. I saw the delivery drivers, the last mile of the entire urban ecosystem. The men and women who were the invisible cogs in the city's machine. I saw how the system failed them. I saw how a badly timed delivery, a blocked loading zone, or an inefficient route could cost them an hour of their day, could cascade into a failed promise to their kid. I learned that the cafe's efficiency was often built on the driver's inconvenience. This knowledge was utterly useless in my family's economy. My mother's praise remained a weapon, a conditional clause designed to correct, not to support. "Natalia, your analysis of that book is interesting," she'd say at one of those public board meetings. "You would be truly brilliant, just like your sister, if you applied that same focus to something that matters, like tax law. Or, that suit is fine. You would look so powerful. Natalia, if you just lost that last 10 pounds and stood up straight, presence is power." I was always a project that was failing her quality control. I made the mistake of trying to impress them. Once, only once. It was early in my MBA program, before I truly understood. I had been working on a dynamic routing model for a supply chain management class. I was proud of it. I'd stayed up for 72 hours straight, fueled by Driftwood's darkest roast, and I'd found a real, tangible inefficiency in a local grocery chain's delivery system. I brought my printouts, my charts, my graphs, to Sunday dinner. "Dad," I said, my voice electric with a passion they had never seen and would never understand. I spread the charts on the priceless, 19th century mahogany table, right on top of the silk runner. "Look, this is the current port-to-warehouse route. It's static, but if the trucking collective uses real-time traffic data, fed from city sensors, and combines it with port clearance data, like this," I pointed to my algorithm, "they could save an average of 18% on fuel and nearly 30% on driver overtime." I looked up, beaming, expecting something, a flicker of interest, a nod of financial respect. Graham stared at the papers as if I had just placed a dead, bloody animal on his table. He didn't speak. Lydia, ever the conductor, rushed in to fill the horrifying, silent vacuum of my earnestness. Natalia, that's so technical. You have ink on your fingers, she said, her voice a strained high society chirp. Look, Aubrey, she said, pulling a sheaf of cream-colored, heavyweight cards from her purse. The calligrapher sent the samples for the wedding invitations. Do we prefer the heirloom script or the classic script? She fanned them out, deliberately, over my charts, my logistics model, my data, my breakthrough, was physically, tangibly erased by the weight of their priorities. Graham caught me later, in the hall, by the sterile, expensive painting he'd bought at an auction. His hand on my arm was not gentle. It was a grip of ownership. Natalia, he said, his voice low and devoid of all warmth. I saw your charts. This house, this life. He gestured to the polished art, the silent, looming architecture, is built on tangible assets, on equities, on generational wealth, not on graphs about delivery trucks. It's not a daydream, Dad, I said, my voice tight. It's optimization. It's profit. It's money. It's a distraction, he snapped, his eyes cold. It's a job for the people who work for people like us. This house, this family, does not pay for daydreams. We pay for you to network. We pay for you to join the world we built. Understand the difference. That was the day I stopped talking. That was the day I stopped trying to explain. I learned the power of strategic silence. I became an anthropologist in my own home, a quiet, watchful observer of this strange, cold tribe. I learned to nod. I learned to smile faintly. Yes, Mother. I understand, Father. And while I nodded, I was taking notes. I was building a mental ledger of my own, a detailed dossier of their flaws, their blind spots, their pressure points. Entry 1. They are terrified of public perception. Their entire identity is a public relations campaign. Their greatest fear is not failure, it's public failure. Entry 2. They are functionally illiterate in the modern economy. They see logistics as a cost, a dirty word. They have no idea it is the single most important engine of all modern commerce. They are blind. Entry 3. Their definition of value is fatally narrow, based on pedigree and appearance, not on performance or impact. This isolation was a terrible, profound, and cold thing. But in the long, rain-lashed nights of my MBA program, that cold loneliness became fuel. It burned clean and hot and silent. Every time Lydia dismissed my work, I ran another 1,000 simulations. Every time Graham mentioned Aubrey's real-world success, I dug deeper into my code, refining my algorithms. I wasn't working to impress them anymore. I was working to escape them. I was working to displace them. I was building my own ship, plank by plank, in the darkness, and I was sharpening my tools. When I enrolled at Cascade, they offered to buy me a glass-walled condominium in Bellevue. It's a good investment, Natalia. A good address. I refused. I took my savings from Driftwood and the last of my college funds, and I rented a 300-square-foot studio in Capitol Hill. The pipes clanged at 4 a.m. The heating was unreliable. The view was of a brick wall and a perpetually gray, narrow slice of Seattle sky. It was perfect. It was the first room I had ever lived in that did not smell of their expectations, their polish, their silent, suffocating judgment. Lydia visited once, and only once, for 10 minutes. She stood in the center of the tiny room, her designer coat clutched tight, looking at my secondhand sofa and my shelves made of cinder blocks and pine boards. "It's very temporary, dear," she said, her voice strained, as if she were touring a war zone. That is when I knew I was home. That night, looking out at the rain. I made a promise to myself, a silent vow. My value did not need a witness. It did not need Graham's approval or Lydia's validation or Aubrey's condescending smirk. My value was not a line item on their social ledger. It was in the work. It was in the code. It was in the solution. It did not need their permission to exist. It just needed to be real. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood and settled my nerves, that the paper I held in my hand at that dinner, the one sitting in my blazer pocket right now, was not an execution. It was my liberation. The document in my pocket was a period, a full stop. My family had written the end to the story they thought I was in. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I was already 3 chapters into a new book, and I was the one writing it. That book was called Root Weave. It was my capstone project, but that name feels laughably small now. It was my obsession, my thesis, my counter-argument to the entire Merritt Perez worldview. The idea was born in the steam and chaos of driftwood coffee, watching those delivery drivers burn time and fuel they didn't have, trapped in a system that saw them as a rounding error. My father dismissed it as graphs about delivery trucks. I was building the engine to prove him wrong. RootWeave was not just another mapping API. It was a real-time dynamic logistics platform designed for the little guys, the small businesses, the independent drivers, the floral shops and bakeries that couldn't afford the multi-million-dollar optimization suites used by the global giants. It didn't just find the shortest route, it found the smartest route. It ingested live traffic, weather, port congestion, city construction data, even event schedules, and rerouted drivers on the fly, not just to save gas, but to save their one non-renewable resource time. This was not a solo flight. I am not that arrogant. I'm the product architect and the lead algorithm designer. But RootWeave would be nothing but a folder of theoretical math without Leo Park and Mara Quinn. Leo Park is a data engineer who is, I am convinced, part human, part caffeine-fueled supercomputer. He doesn't just read data, he interrogates it. He sees the patterns in the noise, the ghosts in the machine. He was the one who, on a Tuesday at 3 a.m, figured out how to use the city's light-phasing data to predict intersection bottlenecks, a problem I had been stuck on for a month. He lives on cold pizza and a diet of absolute, provable facts. Mara Quinn is our user experience lead. If Leo is the brain, Mara is the heart and the conscience. She's the one who grabbed my initial designs, with their dense data fields and engineer-focused readouts, and threw them back at me. "A driver can't read this, Natalia," she'd yelled, not angrily, but with passion. "He's driving. He has 6 seconds to make a decision at a red light. This isn't a spreadsheet. It's a co-pilot. Make it talk to him." She fights for the human on the other side of the screen with a ferocity that I had only ever used for self-defense. The 3 of us didn't have a startup office. We didn't have a garage. We had my 300-square-foot studio. We turned my tiny galley kitchen into a command center. My one good wall, the one not made of brick, disappeared under a blizzard of colored Post-it notes. Yellow for core features, blue for user stories, pink for critical bugs. My refrigerator was no longer for food. It was a whiteboard, covered in system architecture diagrams drawn in erasable marker. The data inflow arrow pointing directly at a magnet from the Pike Place market. We bought a second-hand, 6-foot-tall whiteboard on Craigslist and balanced it on my cinder block shelves. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, the ozone scent of overworked laptops, and the faint, sugary tang of Mara's stress baking. We lived by a single clock the project deadline. We argued, we despaired, we coded, and we built. It was the most functional, honest, and productive family I had ever been a part of. We were not performing for anyone, we were just working. After 3 months of this caffeine-fueled siege, we had a beta, a raw, ugly, but functional beta. Now we had to prove it worked outside my kitchen. I went back to my roots. I went to the small businesses I knew from my time at Driftwood. I went to the bakery that supplied the scones, the micro-roaster, the independent floral delivery guy I used to chat with at 5 a.m. I convinced 12 of them to join our pilot program. I promised them nothing but the truth. This might fail, but if it works, it will save you money you are currently burning just to sit in traffic. For 6 weeks, we ran the pilot. It was brutal. The first iteration crashed the entire system when the driver from the floral shop went through the I-90 tunnel. Losing GPS, Leo didn't sleep for 2 days. rewriting the predictive pathing code. Mara's interface was too bright for night driving, so she rebuilt the entire CSS in a dark mode first framework. I found a critical flaw in my core algorithm. It was too efficient. Trying to route a bakery van down a one-way alley that was too narrow for the vehicle, we fixed it. We iterated, we patched, we updated, and we listened. At the end of week 6, we ran the numbers. The results were clean. They were undeniable. The 12 businesses in our pilot, running in the chaotic, traffic-snarled heart of downtown Seattle, had seen an average fuel cost saving of 18%. 18%. And more importantly, Mara's driver surveys showed an average reduction of 45 minutes per driver, per day. We weren't just saving gas, we were giving people back an hour of their lives. I took the results to my faculty mentor, Professor Halden. Halden is a quiet, brilliant man who had spent 20 years in the private sector before coming to Cascade to, as he put it, atone. He looked at my executive summary, at the hard numbers, at the graphs showing the cost savings, and he nodded slowly. Then he looked at Mara's driver survey summaries. He read the quotes. I made it to my kids' t-ball game for the first time. I'm not as stressed at the end of the day. I feel like I'm finally smarter than the traffic. Halden looked up at me, his eyes sharp and clear over his glasses. He didn't congratulate me on the 18%. He said, "You did it, Ms. Perez. You saw the people inside the data." That was the praise I had been starving for my entire life. It had nothing to do with money and everything to do with impact. The next step was the Northwest Student Venture Symposium. It was the biggest showcase for university-led projects in the region. It was a chance to get in front of real investors, real industry leaders. It was also, in my mind, the first real stage for Rootweave. We registered with 2 days to spare. We didn't have a budget for a fancy booth. We had a 6-foot folding table rented from the university events department. We had my personal laptop, and we had a slightly yellowish, flickering projector that Leo had borrowed from the data science lab, its fan whining like a tiny, dying jet engine. While my family was planning my celebration dinner at Maison de Cum, I was in my studio, cutting and pasting a new pitch deck, not sleeping, not eating, just running on the clean, high-octane fuel of the work itself. The symposium floor was a jungle of ambition. Teams from every major university were there, all with gleaming, professionally printed banners, custom-branded stress balls, and slick videos running on 40-inch monitors. Then there was our booth, table, old projector, 3 nervous, overtired graduate students. We looked like a bake sale at a tech conference. My mother would have been mortified. I had never been more proud. Our presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. in one of the smaller breakout rooms, Room C, Emerging Platforms. When we got there, the room was half full of what looked like other students, a few bored-looking professors, and a handful of men in suits who were clearly just killing time between the fintech and AI keynotes. Leo set up the whining projector. Mara passed out a single-page, no-frills flyer. I plugged in my laptop and took the small stage. The spotlight was hot. For a second, my throat closed. I saw my father's face, heard his voice. This house does not pay for daydreams. Then I saw Leo and Mara in the front row, giving me a small, terrified nod, and I saw the face of the delivery driver from my memory. His shoulders slumped in exhaustion. I clicked the first slide. Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Perez, and today, I am not going to talk to you about logistics. I am going to talk to you about a driver named Mike. I didn't open with the algorithm. I didn't open with the 18%. I opened with the human. I told them about Mike, the floral shop driver. I told them about his day, the 4:30 a.m. start, the fight for loading zone space, the impossible delivery windows, the radio dispatcher who treated him like a machine, the traffic that was his personal, daily enemy. I painted a picture of a man being crushed by a system that was fundamentally, mathematically, and morally inefficient. We are taught, I said, my voice gaining strength, the tremor gone. That efficiency is about cutting costs. that it's about minimizing fuel burn and maximizing deliveries. But what if that's wrong? What if true efficiency isn't just about saving money, but about saving people? What if we stopped treating drivers like Mike as a cost to be managed and started treating them as an asset to be leveraged? Then, and only then, did I click to slide 2. It was a demo of the RouteWeave UI. This is RouteWeave. We built a platform that sees the human in the data. I walked them through it. The clean interface, the real-time rerouting, the pilot program data, the 18%, the 45 minutes. I didn't just present a product. I presented an argument. I presented a new definition. When I finished, there was a beat of silence. Not the polite, bored silence I was expecting. It was the silence of a room full of people who had actually been listening, who were processing. Then the applause started. It wasn't the polite, obligatory applause of a gala. It was loud. It was real. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was when the hands went up. Not just 1 or 2, a dozen. How do you scale the data ingestion? What's your pricing model for a small business? Have you factored in driver union rest break requirements? Because that's the part that always kills us. Can the UI be voice activated? They weren't just clapping. They were interrogating. They were engaging. They saw it. They understood the work. For 30 minutes, we were flooded. Leo was at the whiteboard, drawing data flow charts. Mara was demoing the UI on her phone to a cluster of people. I was just trying to answer the rapid-fire questions from VCs and logistics managers who had suddenly materialized. As the crowd started to thin, I finally took a breath. My blazer was sticking to my back. My throat was raw. I was euphoric. "Not bad. Perez," Leo said, punching my arm. They got it," Mara whispered, her eyes wide. That's when I saw him. He hadn't been in the scrum. He was standing at the very back of the room, by the door, his arms crossed. He was older, in his late 50s, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit, but he wore it like a man who was more comfortable in a flannel shirt. He hadn't moved. He had just watched. As our last questioner moved on, he uncrossed his arms and walked toward us. He didn't look at the buzzing projector or the post-it-covered laptop. He looked directly at me. "Good presentation," he said. His voice was quiet, a low gravel. It cut through the dissipating noise of the room. "Thank you," I said. "Most people pitch me efficiency," he said, his eyes not leaving mine. "They mean cheaper. They mean faster. They mean cutting heads. I'm so damn tired of that word." He looked at the single flyer he'd picked up. "You talked about drivers. You talked about t-ball games." "They're part of the system," I said, my voice steady. "The most important part." He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "You're right." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card. It was not a flimsy, glossy card. It was heavy, cream-colored stock, with simple, embossed black letters. He handed it to me. "Reed Kincaid," he said. "I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Orion Freight Systems." My blood went cold. Orion Freight, not a small business, not a local roaster. Orion was one of the largest, most powerful logistics and freight systems companies in North America. They were a titan. They were the kind of company my father wished he had on his client list. I looked at the card. I looked at him. "What's rare?" "Ms. Perez," Reed Kincaid said, his gaze unwavering, "is not the tech. The tech is good, but I can buy tech. What's rare is your definition. Efficiency equals fairness. That's new, and it's smart." He gestured to the card in my hand. "My office is downtown. My assistant will call you. I want to hear more." He didn't wait for a reply. He just nodded again, turned, and walked out of the room. I stared at the card. Orion Freight Systems, Reed Kincaid. I looked at Leo and Mara, who were just staring, open-mouthed. The card in my hand was small and cool to the touch. It was heavier than it looked. It felt like a small, contained, perfectly controlled M80. It was a tiny spark, And I had a feeling I was standing in a room full of gasoline. Reed Kincaid's business card was a tangible weight in my pocket, a stark contrast to the digital, theoretical world I lived in. It was an anchor, a proof of concept. Efficiency equals fairness. He heard me. A man who moves mountains of freight for a living had heard me. The euphoria from the symposium carried me for a solid 12 hours, a high-octane fuel that made my tiny studio feel like a corner office. Then, Sunday arrived. Sunday, in the Merritt Perez calendar, meant the obligatory 8 p.m. check-in call, the one where Lydia and Graham would sit on their white sofas, a speakerphone between them, and audit the progress of their assets. I dialed, the Kincaid card sitting on my desk next to the phone. Natalia. Dear, Lydia's voice trilled, thin and bright. We're so looking forward to the dinner on Wednesday. The reservations at Maison de Cume are confirmed. I'm looking forward to it, too, I said, a neutral, flat statement. Good. Now, your father has some wonderful news he's arranged. Before that, I interrupted. This was new. I never interrupted. The silence on the other end was a sudden, cold vacuum. I wanted to update you on my capstone project. We presented at the Northwest Venture Symposium this week. Oh, Lydia's voice was a polite, icy question mark. That's nice, dear. Were there lovely little sandwiches? It went well. I pushed on, my voice steady. The project, Rootweave, got some significant interest. I have a follow-up meeting scheduled with the Chief Executive Officer of Orion Freight Systems. The name just hung in the air. I expected, perhaps naively, that CEO and Orion might trigger some flicker of financial recognition in my father. Instead, Lydia just sighed, a long, exasperated, theatrical sigh. It was the sound she made when a caterer served the wrong vintage of champagne. Natalia, she said, her voice dripping with a pained, velvety condescension. We have been over this. Computers are a tool, like the landscaping service. They are not a career. You are not a repairman. You are a merit. Orion. Isn't that the trucking company? How dreadfully industrial. You're 27. It's time to stop playing with these little projects. Lydia! Graham's voice cut in, the rumble of a disappointed god. He wasn't speaking to me. He was managing her, as he always did. Graham, it's true I just want her to be presentable. All this data, it's not a future. That's enough, he said. Then, his voice shifted, focusing on me down the line, cold and clinical. Natalia, your mother is right. This Rootweave fantasy is over. You're graduating. It's time to put on a suit and do a real job. You have a hobby, he snapped. And I have fixed it. I had dinner with Bill Richardson at the club on Thursday. You know Bill. His private equity firm is one of the most respected in the state. They have an analyst opening on their tech portfolio team. It's entry level, of course. You'll be running numbers. Not whatever it is you do, but it's respectable. It's a real firm. I was silent. My hand was resting on the Kincaid card. A PE firm, running numbers, a respectable job. I've already given Bill my word that you'd be delighted, Graham continued, his voice smoothing out now that the deal was closed in his mind. You'll start in 2 weeks, the Monday after graduation. It's all arranged. We expect you to apply yourself. Natalia, do not make me look bad. This was a significant favor. He clicked off. The line went dead. He hadn't asked. He hadn't offered. He had arranged. He had leveraged his word and his favor to buy me a cage, and he had presented it as a gift. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text. From Aubrey. The digital cleanup crew. Just heard Dad's plan. Take it. Be realistic for once. A job at Richardson's is stable, and it's a real brand. This Rootweave thing is a science project. Money is smart. Natalia, don't be a fool. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with a white-hot, silent rage that was so profound it felt like my blood had turned to ice. Money is smart. This was their entire gospel. I was drowning in the weight of their help, a velvet-wrapped knife designed to cut my dreams out, presented as a surgical necessity. The next day, I didn't go to the lab. I walked, in the rain, to the Cascade University Student Success Center. I made an appointment with a school counselor, Dr. Alani, a woman with kind eyes and a simple, plant-filled office that smelled like paper and mint. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat down and, in the most clinical, detached voice I could manage, I laid out the situation as if it were a complex business problem. I have a conflict of stakeholders, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. My primary stakeholders, I motioned to my head, have issued a directive that is in direct conflict with the core mission of my new venture. Their definition of success is low risk, high prestige. My venture's definition is high impact. They have arranged an alternative path that I'm expected to take, and they have tied it to their personal reputation. Dr. Alani listened. She just listened, her hands steepled. For 10 straight minutes, she didn't interrupt. She didn't offer platitudes. When I finally, quietly, wound down, she nodded. That is a very clear and concise summary of a hostile takeover attempt, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I stared at her. I guess it is. Natalia, she said, leaning forward. In your logistics models, what do you do when a shipment is routed to the wrong hub? You reroute it, I said. You stop it, you identify the correct path, and you redirect the resources. Exactly. You don't keep sending it to the wrong hub just because the original manifest said to. You're an adult. You're a graduate student. You are not a package. You are the dispatcher. You've been letting them write your manifest for 27 years. It's time to take control of your own clipboard. They're my family, I whispered. I can't just build a wall. I'm not suggesting a wall, she said. And this is the part I will never forget. A wall is a blunt instrument. It keeps everyone out. It's a fortress. It's built from fear. What you need is a boundary. A boundary is a technical instrument. It's precise. It shows the world exactly where your property line is. It has a gate and a lock, and you are the only one with the key. You decide who comes in. You decide what goes out. They are not hostile stakeholders. They are people who are used to walking onto your property and telling you how to arrange the furniture. It's time to post a no trespassing sign, politely, but firmly. I walked out of that office an hour later, the rain still falling, but I was no longer cold. I went back to my studio. I took out a yellow legal pad and a black pen. I drew a line down the middle. At the top of the left column, I wrote, "They want." At the top of the right column, I wrote, "I want," the "they want" column filled up instantly. Me to work at Richardson's, me to be an analyst, me to be respectable, me to be quiet, me to look good in the wedding photos for Aubrey, me to be grateful, me to be, essentially, a better, quieter version of Aubrey. Then I looked at the right column. I want. I stared at the blank page for a long time. Then, I started to write. Root weave. To build it. Not sell it. Not yet. To make efficiency equals fairness a real metric. To give Leo and Mara jobs and equity. To answer Reed Kincaid's questions. To get that floral driver, Mike, home for his kids' t-ball game. To prove that graphs about delivery trucks are the goddamn future. To be independent, not disowned, independent, on my own terms. To be the dispatcher. I dropped the pen. I looked at the two lists. The they want list was about appearances. The I want list was about work. And for the first time in my entire, curated, suffocating life, the I want column was longer, heavier, and more real. I picked up my phone. I opened the group text message, the one titled, Merritt Perez Family. It was filled with a constant, chirping stream of noise. Aubrey had just posted 6 photos of centerpiece options. Lydia had posted a link to a Society page article about her latest gala. My finger hovered over the mute button. Dr. Alani's voice was in my head, a boundary, not a wall. I pressed mute until I turn it back on, which I knew meant always. A wave of absolute giddy silence washed over me. Then I went to my other group chat, the one titled Root Weave Core, Leo, Mara, me. It was buzzing with technical questions. I opened the settings. I clicked Notifications All Messages. I turned the alert volume up. Then, my phone rang. Not a text, a call. From Leo. His voice was not a buzz. It was a siren. NN, we have a problem. A huge one. My blood, which had been so hot with anger and then so calm with resolve, went cold again. But this was a different cold. This was the cold of a professional crisis. What, I said, all business. The pilot data, it's garbage, all of it. I was rerunning the week 6 simulations for the Kincaid prep, and I found it. 4 critical data bugs. We have a packet loss issue from any driver on the Verizon network. The data is just vanishing. We have a server sync cascade failure. The timestamps are all wrong, and the UI, the drivers, they hated the last mile acceptance flow. They were just hitting accept to shut it up. Not because it was the right route. The data is compromised. The 18%. It might be bullshit. It might be all bullshit. 5 days ago, this call would have been the end. It would have been the final confirmation of my father's words. A hobby. A distraction. Not a real job. I would have cried. I would have deleted the file. I would have called my father, accepted the analyst job, and died a slow, respectable death behind a spreadsheet. But I was looking at my list, to build it. I'm on my way, I said. Call Mara. Get the coffee going. We're not sleeping. We turned my kitchen into a war room. For 48 hours. We didn't just work. We fought. Leo. His eyes red-rimmed and his hair looking like he'd been struck by lightning. Dove into the network code. Muttering about asynchronous handshakes. He didn't sleep. He subsisted on a diet of cold coffee and pure, unadulterated spite for the Verizon network. Mara, seeing the driver flow feedback, threw out her entire design and rebuilt it from scratch on the whiteboard. Simple, one tap, accept or new. That's it. They don't have time for options. And me, I wasn't just the product lead. I became the CEO. I coordinated the fight. I dove into the server logic, my old nemesis, and I found the timestamp sync error. It was my algorithm, my beautiful, elegant algorithm, that was causing the cascade. It was too efficient, trying to query the server every second, creating a feedback loop that corrupted the logs. At 3 a.m, on the second day, I stood back. Leo was asleep, his head on his keyboard. Mara was curled up on my second-hand sofa, her laptop open on her chest. I opened a new, clean document. I titled it, Root Weave Risk Assessment Mitigation Plan, May 22nd. I wrote like I was presenting to an invisible, skeptical, and incredibly powerful board of directors. I documented the 4 bugs. I detailed the potential impact on data integrity. I outlined, step by step, Leo's new packet loss protocol, Mara's new UX flow, and my patch for the server sync loop. I created a timeline for testing and redeployment. It was the most honest, brutal, and professional document I had ever written. When I was done, I stared at it, then I created a new email, addressed to Natalia. Perez Root, Weave, Kamsa, a forward-thinking address I'd registered months ago. I attached the document and I hit send. A moment later, my phone pinged. A new email. From me. I wasn't asking for permission to dream anymore. I was documenting the plan. This was work. This was real. This was a career. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text from Aubrey or an email from myself. It was a calendar notification from my mother's executive assistant. Event pre-graduation dinner for Natalia Perez. Location, Maison d'Écume. Time tomorrow. 8 p.m. The dinner. The celebration. I looked at the notification. I looked at my sleeping, exhausted, brilliant team. I looked at the risk assessment plan on my screen. The old me would have been terrified, consumed with anxiety about the performance, the clothes, the smiles. The old me would have been desperate for their approval. The new me just looked at it as a line item on a busy schedule. The last piece of old business to be cleared off the books, I knew, with a calm, cold certainty. What was going to happen at that restaurant? I had rejected my father's generous offer. I had ignored his command. I had, in his eyes, made him look bad. The dinner was not a celebration. It was an execution. They would use the public setting, the weight of their disappointment, to deliver the final blow. They would bring their papers. I saved my work. I shut my laptop. I put a blanket over Mara. I knew the envelope was coming. I knew exactly what it would say. What I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't have predicted as I stood there in my tiny, chaotic, and wonderfully real studio, was the emotion I would feel when I finally saw it. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was peace, absolute, total, and complete. They were just catching up to a decision I had already made. They weren't firing me. I had already quit. I walked out of Maison de Cum and into the cold, soft Seattle rain. I didn't take a car. I walked. I walked the 2 miles back to my studio, the mist on my face feeling like a scouring, washing away the smell of browned butter and old money. The heavy crepe envelope was a sharp, rectangular weight in my blazer pocket, a physical reminder of the transaction, a clean cut, an amputation. When I got to my studio, the lights were still on. The place was a disaster, a beautiful, functional wreck from our 48-hour war room session. Coffee cups were everywhere. The whiteboard was a chaotic map of our new architecture. Leo's sleeping bag was still crumpled in the corner. It was the most beautiful room in the world. I took off my damp blazer. I reached into the pocket and pulled out the envelope. We disown Natalia Perez. I smoothed it out on my small, cluttered desk, right under the gooseneck lamp. Then I went to my laptop. I opened a file I had downloaded a week ago, in a fit of defiant optimism. It was a blank, standard employment offer template, not the one from my father's friend Bill Richardson, just a generic file. At the top, in brackets, it said, "Your company name here." I took the thick, legal disownment paper, and I placed it under the blank, empty offer letter. It was not a grave. It was a foundation. It was the bedrock on which I would build. I was staring at it, the paper glowing under the lamplight, when my phone buzzed on the desk. It vibrated, sliding across the wood, and I saw the screen light up. It was the Roteweave core chat. It was a message from Leo, time-stamped at 1:04 a.m. N. You need to see this. Attached was an image. It was a graph, a performance analysis graph, messy and beautiful. Leo's follow-up text came a second later. It's the patch, the server sync fix combined with the new weather API call. It's N. It's not just working, it's learning. The algorithm is now cross-referencing live precipitation density data against the city's traffic cam feed. It's not just reacting to traffic, it's predicting it. It's routing drivers away from intersections before they turn red because it knows how rain impacts driver behavior at that specific crossing. It's exceeding our original pilot projections by N. I think it's exceeding them by 28%. It's beautiful. I just stared at the screen. My algorithm was alive. It was fueled by the Seattle rain. It was smarter than I was. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mara. Demo locked, UI is clean, and I added the new feature. Coded it myself last night while you were at your dinner. I'm calling it the shortest path fairness protocol. What is it I typed? My fingers flying. It's the T-ball game feature. She wrote back. It's an ethical override. If the system detects a glut of high-value corporate deliveries, it will intentionally deprioritize one of them to ensure that an independent, single-vehicle driver like Mike the floral guy gets priority optimized. It ensures the little guy doesn't just get the scraps. It's what we said we were building. It's efficiency equals fairness. as code, ready to show Kincaid. I put the phone down. My team wasn't just building a product, they were building a movement. They were codifying our morality. The next day, I called Professor Halden. I needed to prep. I told him everything. My voice flat and clinical. I told him about the Orion meeting. I told him about my father's arranged job at Richardson's. I told him, finally, about the envelope I received at dinner. Halden was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. I could just hear him breathing. "Natalia," he said finally, his voice quiet and firm. "Men like your father and men like Reed Kincaid are both in the business of acquisition. You must understand this. Your father's world, the Bill Richardson world, they acquire prestige. They collect names. They collect respectable assets. It's cheap, and it's hollow. Men like Kincaid, they acquire value, real, tangible, world-changing value. It's expensive. It requires vision. And it's what he sees in you." "What do I do?" I asked. "He will try to buy you, Natalia," Halden said, his voice sharp. "He will try to hire your team. He'll offer you a mountain of money to come work in his lab. He will try to buy your tech, absorb it, and he will let your shortest path fairness protocol die in a corporate subcommittee, because it will, on paper, cost him 1.2% efficiency in the short term. You cannot let that happen. When you go in there, you are not a student asking for a job. You are a founder. Do not sell cheap, sell right." His words were a splash of cold water. He was right. I hung up and opened a new document. I titled it, Orion, Meeting 2, Interrogation. I wasn't going there to be impressive. I was going there to get answers. I typed out 3 questions. My armor, my strategy, one control. If Orion licenses or acquires Root Weave, who holds the final, unvetoable say on the algorithm's core mission? Who protects the fairness protocol? 2 ethics. What is Orion's current, non-public policy? When bottom-line efficiency conflicts with the ethical treatment of its drivers and contractors, I needed a real-world example, not a PR statement. 3 community, a tool this powerful, at Orion's scale, will not just compete with the small businesses we designed it for. It will annihilate them. What is Orion's tangible, high-investment plan to support and integrate the independent network? Not just crush it. I saved the document. I knew my pitch. The email came the next morning. It was not from Reed Kincaid. It was from a name I didn't know. Executive Assistant to the Chief Executive Officer, Orion Freight Systems. The subject line was Simple Orion, Meeting Proposal. The body was shorter. Ms. Perez, Mr. Kincaid was impressed by your presentation and would like to schedule a follow-up discussion at his office. He is available this Thursday at 10 a.m. A car will be sent to your address. This was Wednesday. This Thursday was tomorrow. The day before my graduation ceremony, I replied with one word, confirmed. At 9:45 a.m. on Thursday, a black, silent, hybrid town car pulled up outside my studio. It was the kind of car my father used, a physical statement of, I am more important than the environment, but I'm also aware of it. The ride was silent. We didn't go to a downtown office building. We went to the port. We drove out onto Pier 94, a place I had only ever seen from a distance. The car pulled up to a building that didn't look like an office. It looked like a statement. It was a massive, cantilevered structure of steel and blue-tinted glass, jutting out over the gray, choppy waters of Elliott Bay. It was the complete opposite of Maison de Comb's warm, golden, fake history. This building was cold, sharp, and brutally real. The lobby was not a lobby. It was a cathedral of logistics. There was no art on the walls, no plush sofas, just a 20-foot-tall wall-to-wall screen showing a real-time glowing map of the planet, with thousands of tiny lightships, trucks, planes moving in a complex, silent ballet. The air didn't smell like coffee or perfume. It smelled of faint, clean cedar and the metallic, expensive silence of filtered air. I was escorted by a woman who didn't speak. The elevator was silent, fast, and it made my ears pop. We didn't stop on a middle floor. We went to the top. The doors opened onto an expanse of glass. The entire north wall was a single window, floor to ceiling, looking out over the Sound, the mountains, and the entire city of Seattle. Down below us, massive, bright red container cranes, like giant, prehistoric birds, were unloading a ship. Reed Kincaid was not behind a desk. He was standing at the window, his back to me, a simple mug in his hand. "Ms. Perez," he said, his voice a low gravel, not turning. "Look at that. 5,000 containers on that ship from Busan. My system can get them off, sorted, and onto trucks in less than 6 hours. My efficiency is, for all intents and purposes, perfect." He turned. His eyes were the color of the water outside. "And then you come along, a 27-year-old student who tells me my perfect system is morally inefficient. You tell me I'm crushing Mike. You, Ms. Perez, have the nerve of a longshoreman. I respect that." "I said the system is inefficient. Mr. Kincaid," I said. My voice was steady. I was not Natalia Perez, daughter of Graham. I was Natalia Perez, founder of Rootweave, the system we all use. "Same thing," he grunted. He walked to a simple, unpolished wooden table in the center of the vast room. "My team ran a full workup on you. Cascade MBA, top 2% of your class, Graham Merritt's daughter." My blood went cold. "He's a fool," Kincaid said, dismissing my entire family history with a single, impatient wave of his hand. "Graham thinks money is the score. He's been trying to get a meeting with my wealth manager for 5 years. He doesn't get it. Money is the fuel. The score is this." He gestured to the entire port, the city, the world outside the glass. "The work." He sat down. "Now, my team says your tech is good, beta level, but the core logic is sound. They say I should buy it, buy your team, give you all fat salaries, put you in a lab on floor 30, and let you build optimization tools for me." This was it. This was Professor Halden's warning, made real. "So," Kincaid said, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto mine, "I have only one question for you. Forget the pitch deck. Forget the numbers. Forget the acquit-hire offer my board wants me to make. Assume I am not your father. Assume I am not Bill Richardson. Assume I give you everything. Full control, my capital, my resources, my network." He paused. "What do you build?" This was the moment, the setup and the payoff. He wasn't asking about the tech. He was asking about the vision. I did not pause. I did not look at my notes. I met his gaze. "I don't build a tool for Orion, Mr. Kincaid. I build a network." His expression didn't change. "Go on." "I build an ecosystem. I build a platform where the independent driver, the Mike, with the one floral van, isn't just a cog you crush. He's a partner. I use Orion's scale and resources not to annihilate the little guy, but to empower him. I give him the same predictive routing tools, the same weather data advantages, the same short request fairness protocol that your 5,000 container ships get. You get access to the last-mile delivery network you've never been able to crack, and he gets the tools to compete, to get home for that T-ball game. I build a network that proves, at scale, that efficiency equals fairness isn't just a slogan, it is the most profitable and the most defensible business model for the next 50 years. I build a system that doesn't just win, I build a system that lasts. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the steel in the walls. I could hear my own heartbeat. I had either just sealed my future, or I had just been dismissed as an arrogant, naive fool. Reed Kincaid stared at me. His face was granite, unreadable. 1 second, 2. He nodded. It was not a polite nod. It was not a, "that's interesting" nod. It was a single, sharp, downward jerking motion. It was the nod of a carpenter driving a nail. It was the nod of a judge closing a case. It was a gavel. It was a stamp. "My legal team will be in touch with Professor Halden by the end of the day," he said, his voice all business. He stood up. We'll bypass the university's tech transfer office. They're too slow, and their terms are insulting. He walked me to the elevator, his long stride, ground-covering walk. Congratulations on your graduation, Ms. Perez, he said. As the doors slid open, the real work starts Monday. I was back on the pier before I realized I was breathing again. The glass doors slid shut behind me, sealing off that world of silent, cedar-scented power. I stood on the concrete pier. The air was cold, damp, and alive. A massive gust of wind came howling in off Elliott Bay. It tasted of salt, diesel, and cold. Deep water. It hit me full in the chest, flattening my blazer against my ribs, whipping my hair across my face with a stinging slap. It should have chilled me to the bone, but I just felt clean. The wind howled in my ears, a loud, roaring, beautiful sound, and in that one moment, it blew everything else away. It blew away the sound of my father's voice. It blew away the smell of maison de Coum. It blew away the weight of the white carpets, and the judgment, and the 27 years of not quite. They were gone. Just gone. I turned my face into the wind, tasting the salt. I didn't flinch. I didn't even shiver. The wind from Elliott Bay was a promise, but the silence that followed was a test. The high from the meeting with Reed Kincaid lasted exactly as long as the elevator ride to the ground floor. Then, the reality set in. I had made a promise. I built a network that I had no idea how to execute. I was a graduate student with 2 teammates, a buggy beta, and a verbal go from a titan. The email that followed, 24 hours later, was not a congratulatory letter. It was a 5-megabyte PDF from Orion's legal department. It was a letter of intent, but it was drafted like an invasion plan. The subject line was Project Rootweave, Regional Trial Proposal. Confidential. It was dense. It outlined a 3-month, paid, exclusive trial in the Pacific Northwest region. It proposed a set of performance metrics so aggressive they made my hands sweat, and it was tied to a potential licensing rights clause that was so vague and all-encompassing. It essentially said, if they liked it, they owned it. I read it 3 times. The first time, I was euphoric. The second, I was confused. The third time, I was terrified. This was a document designed to make a student like me, dazzled by the Orion logo, sign away her entire future for the price of a short-term trial. My father's arranged job at Richardson's flashed in my mind. This was the same play, just on a bigger field. This was how their world worked. I needed a lawyer. I couldn't call my father's lawyers, the ones in the gleaming downtown towers who smelled of expensive cologne and billed in 6-minute increments. They were his. I couldn't use the university's tech transfer office. Kincaid himself had called them slow, and I knew they would try to claim 75% of the company for the price of their letterhead. I needed someone who wasn't in their world. I needed someone who saw the law as a weapon, not just a shield. I found her name on a Women in Seattle Tech forum. She was mentioned in a thread about Series A funding. The comment was, "Don't go to the big firms unless you want to be a line item. If you want a shark who will actually read your code, call Nadia Rowe." Nadia Rowe's office was not in a glass tower. It was in Fremont, above a bicycle shop, in a small, brick-walled room that smelled of old books and strong black coffee. She wore a leather jacket, black jeans, and had a pair of sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She looked like she could code a server or dismantle a contractual clause with equal surgical precision. I didn't give her a pitch. I just sat down, put the Orion LOI on her desk, and said, "They're trying to steal my company with a trial run proposal." She picked it up. She read it. Her silence was a palpable, professional force. She read all 12 pages, her expression never changing. "They're not trying to steal it," she said, putting the document down. "They're going to steal it, this potential licensing clause in Section 4. Subsection B. It's a boa constrictor. The trial run is just the getting it around your neck part. By month 2, they'll have reverse-engineered your core logic and your team, and by month 3, they'll decline to license and launch Orion Nav, 6 months later. You'll be left with your trial run fee and a non-compete that blacklists you from your own industry. I had never felt such a profound sense of relief. I had found my shark. But, she said, leaning forward, a small, dangerous smile on her face. They've made a mistake. They've sent you a contract. That means they want something. And the man who signed this, Reed Kincaid, he's not an idiot. He's just testing you. He's testing to see if you're the daughter of Graham Merritt, who would be so dazzled she'd sign, or if you're the founder of Rootweave. I'm the founder, I said. Good. Then we send them back a contract that isn't a surrender. What's your non-negotiable? I told her my 3 questions: control, ethics, community. Ethics, she mused. That's a hard one to put in a contract. Mara, my UX lead, is coding it right now, I said. We're calling it the Shortest Path Fairness Protocol. It's an override. It protects the small driver from being crushed by the high-volume clients. It's the core of the algorithm. It's the efficiency equals fairness part. Nadia was still for a moment. Then she just nodded. Okay, I've never written a morality clause into a software licensing deal, but I'm damn well going to try. We won't call it ethics. We'll call it a core logic mandate. We'll make it a technical specification. We'll write it up as Appendix A, the Kincaid-Perez Protocol. We'll flatter him and lock him in at the same time. For the next 2 weeks, while I was supposedly studying for finals, I was no longer taking. Nadia and I rebuilt the contract. We tore it down to the studs. We rewrote Section 4. We turned the boa constrictor into a partnership. We defined the trial run not as an audition, but as a paid integration test. And we attached Appendix A, a clean, technically precise, 3-page document that defined the Fairness Protocol as an inalienable, uneditable, core component of the licensed software. The work was brutal, but as we were deep in it, the world outside started to catch up. The buzz from the symposium had leaked. I got a call, not from a tech firm, but from an angel fund. Puget Sound Ventures. I knew the name. It was one of the funds my mother served on the charitable advisory board for. It was her world. I took the meeting, out of curiosity. It was at a private club in Medina, the kind of place that still required a jacket and tie, and had white carpets. The man I met was a friend of my father's. He was all condescending smiles and silk-knit ties. Natalia, my dear, he said, patting my hand. We're so proud of this little project. Very ambitious. Your mother is just beaming. I thought of the Disownment paper. I'm sure. We'd like to help, he said. We see its potential as a lovely little acquisition target. We'd like to make an initial angel investment, help you professionalize it, get a real chief executive officer in there, someone with experience. And the terms, I asked, my voice flat. Just a small seed round, say 200,000, in exchange, of course, for a controlling interest, 51%, and 2 board seats. We need to be able to guide you. For instance, he waved his hand. We'd have our tech team strip out that social justice code you mentioned. It's a drag on efficiency, dear, but it's a good story for the university, and you've played it well. Now it's time to be a real businesswoman. I looked at him, at his polished, unlined face, at the world he represented. He was offering me a cage, just a different one, a respectable one. No, thank you, I said. His smile faltered. No, thank you, Natalia. I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. You want to buy 51% of my company for $200,000, fire my team, gut my product, and sell the empty shell. The answer is no. I stood up, leaving him sitting at the table, his mouth slightly open. I walked out of that club. It was the first time I had ever said no to their world with real money on the line. My hands weren't even shaking. I was feeling good. I was feeling strong. The feeling lasted for 2 hours. Then, Leo called me, and his voice was a panic siren. We're under attack. The public demo site, the one we left up from the symposium, it's getting hammered. Someone is running a systematic scraper bot against it. It's not just testing the front end, it's trying to find exploits. It's trying to steal the code. The blood drained from my face. Can you block it? I can block the IP, Leo said, his voice fast. But they'll just spoof another one. This is professional. They're good, but I'm better. I have an idea. It's a little gray hat. What? We don't block them, Leo said, the panic in his voice replaced by a cold, sharp, engineer's focus. We encourage them. I'm going to migrate the real demo site to a new, unlisted server. Tonight, then, on the old server, I'm going to set up a honeypot. A honeypot. I'll leave the front end up, looking exactly the same. But when their bot scrapes the back end, I'm going to feed it a special, gifted version of our algorithm. An older, corrupted build. One that's full of hidden flaws, circular logic, and computational dead ends. It will look like it's working. It will even compile, but it's poison. It will corrupt any system it's plugged into. And while they're happily downloading their stolen prize, I'm going to log everything, every packet, every probe, every handshake, and I will get their real, unspoofed, originating IP address. I will find out exactly who this is. For 2 days, we lived in a state of high-alert, paranoid silence. Then, at 3 a.m. on Friday, my phone lit up. A single email from Leo. Subject gotcha. Attached was a single text file, a log. It showed the attacker's IP, the time of the breach, the data they downloaded, and at the bottom, Leo's traceroute, the originating IP address. The attacker was not a competitor. It wasn't a shell corporation in Eastern Europe. It was from an IP block registered to Kincaid, Strauss, and Meyer. The name hit me like a physical blow. Aubrey's firm, the firm her fiancé, Mr. Right Bloodline, was a junior partner at. I remembered Aubrey's text. Be realistic for once. Money is smart. This was their smart. They hadn't just tried to get my father to stop me. When that failed, they had tried to steal my work, to take my science project and turn it into their own asset. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was corporate espionage. My first instinct was to call Aubrey and scream. My second was to call Nadia and Sue. I did neither. I stood in my dark studio, the city lights reflecting off my screen. This changed everything. This was not a weapon to be fired in anger. This was leverage. This was a classified, high-value asset. This was the difference between being a victim and being a strategist. I replied to Leo, "Save that log. Encrypt it. Send the original file to my personal, encrypted server. Do not speak of this to anyone. We do not use this. Not yet." The game was no longer about getting a good contract. It was about winning. The next day, we had our final negotiation call with Orion. It was me and Nadia in her small office, and a wall of speakerphone voices from Orion's legal department. They were pushing back, hard, on Appendix A. "We find the fairness protocol to be operationally aspirational," their lead counsel said, his voice bored and heavy. "It creates potential liabilities. We'd like to move it to a future development goals memo, not part of the binding contract." This was the moment. The old me, the student, would have folded. But I wasn't the student. I was the woman holding a file of encrypted logs. I knew what the world was really like. "No," I said. My voice was as cold and calm as Reed Kincaid's. "Excuse me," the lawyer said, unused to being denied. "No," I repeated. "Appendix A is not aspirational. Appendix A is root weave. It is the entire, fundamental, non-negotiable value proposition. Without Appendix A, there is no efficiency equals fairness. Without Appendix A, there is no deal. There is no software. We are done." I motioned to Nadia. She hit the mute button. We sat in silence. My heart was hammering. "That," Nadia said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across her face, "was perfect." We let them sit in the silence for 2 full minutes. We unmuted. The lawyer on the other end cleared his throat. He sounded different, less bored. "Ms. Perez," he said, his voice now respectful. "Understood. We will retain Appendix A as a binding core component. Now, let's discuss the fee structure." The negotiation took another hour, but the fight was over. We had won. When Nadia hung up, she was laughing. "You just did in a 60-second pause what it takes most partners a year to do. You scared them straight." The final letter of intent was signed by me, Nadia, and Reed Kincaid. By 5 p.m. that night, graduation eve, the deal was not an acquisition. It was a partnership, a $6.8 million, 2-year licensing and integration deal for the entire Pacific Northwest region. It included a separate, fully funded budget to hire me, Leo, and Mara as the permanent, independent core team of Route Weave, with full operational control. I signed. My hand did not shake. The first wire transfer hit my newly formed business account an hour later. It was a number with so many zeros it looked like a typo. I did not go out and celebrate. I did not buy champagne. I did not even call Leo and Mara, who were already celebrating, their texts of keyboard-smashing joy flooding my phone. I sat down at my laptop. I made 3 wire transfers. The first paid off my entire, crushing, 5-figure student loan debt in a single, silent, beautiful transaction. The second paid off Leo's. The third paid off Mara's. Then, I went online. I found a small, clean, 1-bedroom apartment for rent in a concrete and glass building on the waterfront, not far from Pier 94. I paid the entire year's lease, up front. I packed my 2 suitcases and my 1 box of books. I left the cinder block shelves and the second-hand sofa. The next morning, the morning of my graduation, I woke up in my new, empty apartment. The sun was rising, reflecting off the gray water of the Sound. It was the first time in my life I had woken up as a person who was not in debt, not owned, and not afraid. I had 2 documents on my new, clean kitchen counter. The signed, multi-million-dollar Orion contract and the heavy crepe paper disownment letter from Maison de Cum. I had bought a single, simple, black frame. I picked up the Orion contract, the one with Kincaid's signature next to mine, and I placed it in the frame. Then I took the disownment paper. I read it one last time. "We disown Natalia Perez." I folded it, neatly, precisely. I placed it in the frame behind the Orion contract, a hidden layer, invisible to the world, but supporting the document in front. It was not a memory. It was a sediment layer, the pressure that had been applied, the foundation of the new structure. I hung it on the wall, the only thing in the empty room, and I went to get my cap and gown. The non-disclosure agreement on the Orion deal was a fortress of legal language. Reed Kincaid, his lawyers, and Nadia had ensured that the specific numbers, the 6.8 million, and the name Orion itself, were locked down tighter than a Port Authority container. But the tech world is a small town, and its fences are low. We were bound to silence. But the venture capitalists I had turned down were not. The angel investor from the White Carpet Club, the one I had left sputtering over his drink, was, I suspect, particularly loose-lipped by Friday afternoon. 24 hours after the signing, the smoke signals started to rise. The local Seattle tech journals, the ones that live and breathe the startup ecosystem, began to twitch. The story that broke wasn't a cannon shot. It was a whisper that carried Cascade Capstone Project, Route Weave Lands Major, Undisclosed Logistics Partnership, then another. Is this the biggest student venture deal of the year? Sources point to a massive, multi-year licensing deal for a small team of MBA grads. No names. No numbers, no Orion. Just buzz. In my family's world, buzz was something to be managed, a potential liability. In the university's world, buzz was a marketing triumph. By 3 p.m. on Friday, my phone rang. The caller ID was the dean's office, Cascade University School of Business. I had, in my entire 2-year program, never spoken to the dean. Natalia? The voice was a warm, polished, honey maple syrup. Dean Richardson here. I am calling to personally congratulate you. We have been hearing the most astonishing whispers about the success of Root Weave. It's been a busy week, Dean, I said, my voice neutral. Busy, I should say. She laughed, a practiced, tinkling sound. Well, Natalia, the university board and the faculty see no reason to wait. Your success is a testament to the program, a real flagship. We had an emergency session this afternoon. It is my profound pleasure to inform you that the faculty board has, unanimously, voted to present you with this year's Technology and Innovation Leadership Award at tomorrow's graduation ceremony. The stage, they were, of their own volition, building me a stage. That's an honor, Dean, I said. It's an honor you've earned. My dear, this means you will be seated on the dais. Of course, we will be announcing the partnership publicly. Our media team will send over a request for the specific details we can share. We are all just so proud. This is a moment for Cascade. She hung up. I stared at the phone. They were building me a stage, and they were handing me a microphone. The news. This time, the official news of the Leadership Award was posted on the university's alumni website an hour later, and that, of course, is how they found out. My phone, which I had left on mute, gave a single, polite vibration. The locked screen lit up. A message from the Merritt Perez family chat. My mother had, apparently, unmuted me. Natalia, we saw the university bulletin, the Technology and Innovation Leadership Award. How lovely. This is wonderful for the family's image. Your father and I, and Aubrey and her fiancé, will be in the front VIP row. Of course, please make sure you are seated in the correct place, and do try to stand up straight for the photographs. We need to make sure this distraction of yours at least results in some positive press for the family. Do not ruin the pictures. I read the text. Once, twice, they saw the award. A purely ceremonial gesture, as the entire prize. They saw themselves, in the front row, as the main event. They were positioning themselves to receive the reflected glory of a lovely little honor, while remaining completely, blissfully, and fatally ignorant of the $6.8 million engine of fact sitting under the hood. They had no idea what they were about to watch. I typed back a single, polite response. Understood. Thank you. See you tomorrow. I was polite. I was courteous. But the cold, clean realization was that I no longer needed them to be my witnesses. They weren't even qualified for the job. My real team, meanwhile, was in orbit. Mara called me, and she wasn't crying, but her voice was thick. A leadership award, N. They're giving you an award for being you. What are you going to say? You have to write a speech. I don't have a speech, Mara, I said, looking out my new window at the gray water. Good, she said, her voice instantly fierce. Don't write one. Don't be polished. Don't be Dean Richardson, polite. Be real. Get up there and tell them the truth. Tell them what it cost. Then Leo. He wasn't focused on the ceremony. He was focused on the work. NN, this is insane, he yelled through the phone. He was already set up in the new, tiny two-person office space I had leased for us down the hall from Nadia's. Orion's tech team is unreal. They're not waiting until Monday. They want the first integration test. They want me to build a live dashboard. They want to run a surge test during the graduation ceremony. My breath caught. A surge test while I'm on stage. Yes, he shouted, his voice electric with the joy of a true engineer. Kincaid's lead tech. This woman is a genius. She wants to hit our new servers, the ones we just built, with 1,000 commands per second, a 1,000 command per second stress test, right at 10 a.m. While you're in your stupid hat, isn't that the most beautiful thing you have ever heard? It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. While my old family was polishing their camera lenses, my new family was preparing to test our armor under live fire. That evening, I went to the lab one last time to clean out my desk. Professor Halden was there, waiting for me. He was standing by the empty whiteboard where our first, frantic diagrams had been drawn. "I saw the bulletin," he said, his voice quiet. "Technology and Innovation Leadership Award." "It's just a title, Professor," I said. "It is," he agreed. "But the work is real, which is why I'm here." He was holding a piece of paper, a simple, laser-printed sheet. I recognized it instantly. It was the original graph from our very first pilot, the one that showed the 18% savings, the one I had shown him, my hands shaking, the one that made him say, "You saw the people inside the data. It's obsolete," I said, smiling. "Leo's new algorithm is already light years past this. That's a historical document." "That's exactly what it is," Halden said. He held it out to me, along with a black pen. "It's the first page, the Genesis. I'm framing it for the lab, for the students who come after you. To show them what seeing the people looks like." He tapped the bottom of the page. "Sign it, Natalia, for the wall." My hand was not shaking this time. I took the pen. I signed my name. And underneath it, I wrote, "Efficiency equals fairness." "Congratulations on the deal, Ms. Perez," he said, taking the paper back. "Don't sell cheap, sell right." "I didn't," I said. "We sold right?" "I know," he said, a rare, bright smile on his face. "I'm on the university board. Natalia." I saw the dean's face when the rumored number came up. She almost fainted. "Now go. You're done here." I needed an outfit for tomorrow. I had nothing to wear. The old me, the Natalia of 6 months ago, would have been crippled with anxiety. I would have tried to find a dress that Lydia would approve of. Something that would look appropriate in Aubrey's camera roll. A dress designed to blend in, to appease. I walked from the lab to University Village. I went into the most expensive store I could find, a store I had never dared to even walk past before. I used the new, matte black debit card linked to the Rootweave business account. I did not buy a dress. I did not buy appropriate. I bought armor. It was a suit, a simple, minimalist, breathtakingly cut suit in shark gray. Not black. That was their color. Not blue. That was the color of a corporate drone. Gray, the color of the Seattle sky. The color of tempered steel. The color of the water in Elliott Bay. The color of a clean, unwritten slate. It was made of a wool so fine it felt like silk, and it fit me like a second. Stronger skin. I bought a simple, white silk shell to wear under it. I bought a pair of low, black, powerful-looking heels. I was not buying an outfit for their photographs. I was buying a uniform for my new job. That night, my last night before the new world, I was in my new, almost empty apartment. The framed Orion contract was the only thing on the wall, its black frame a sharp rectangle against the white paint. I laid the gray suit out on my bed. I placed the cap and gown, in their plastic sheath, next to it. Then, I went to my suitcase. I unzipped the side pocket. I pulled out my old blazer, the one from Maison de Cum. I reached into the inner breast pocket. My fingers brushed against the heavy, crepe paper envelope. I pulled it out. I read the words one last time. "We disown Natalia Perez. Effective immediately." I thought about leaving it. I thought about burning it. I thought about tearing it into 1,000 pieces and throwing it into the Sound. No, it was not a curse anymore. It was not a weapon against me. It was my passport. It was the legal, signed, and delivered document of my liberation. It was the proof of my exit from that old, cold country. It was the border crossing. I took the envelope, heavy and thick. I walked to the bed. I lifted the lapel of the new gray suit jacket. I slid the disownment paper, my exit visa, into its inner pocket, right over my heart. It felt correct. I stood in the center of the empty room, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city was a grid of lights. The ferries were moving, silent, bright stars on the black water. I picked up my phone. I went to the clock application. My heart was beating in a slow, heavy, measured rhythm. My breath was short, but not with fear, with anticipation. I set an alarm for 6 a.m., then, just to be sure, I set a second, backup alarm for 6:01 a.m. I did not set them because I was afraid I would oversleep. I set them because I wanted to be absolutely, completely, and viscerally awake. I wanted my mind to be sharp. I wanted my senses to be at their peak. I wanted to be fully conscious for every single nanosecond of the moment their world, their smiles, and their cameras finally, irrevocably, froze. I opened the Rootweave core chat. Leo and Mara were still firing off server test messages. I typed one last thing. See you both tomorrow. Get some rest. You've earned it. I paused. Then I added one more line. And when I'm on stage, don't watch me. Watch the MC. Keep your eyes on the MC. The sound of a university graduation is a strange, muffled thing. It's the sound of thousands of people sitting outside, of dampened pomp and circumstance being piped through speakers, of a collective, nervous cough. The air on the main quad was damp, the sky a classic, pearlescent Seattle gray, huge, purple banners, emblazoned with the Cascade University crest, flapped heavily in the wet wind. On the massive lawn, 10,000 white folding chairs were arranged in perfect, militaristic rows, a sea of white against the green. They were in their assigned seats, front row, VIP section, as promised. My family, the complete Merritt Perez collection, had arrived not just to attend, but to preside. Graham, my father, sat erect, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression one of bored, benevolent authority. He was not here as a father. He was here as a patron. Lydia, my mother, was radiant, her smile as wide and brilliant as the diamond necklace at her throat. She was in her element, the Queen Mother, waving graciously to a university trustee in the next row, and Aubrey, my sister, sat beside her fiancé, Mr. Right Bloodline. They were the perfect, photogenic couple, the living proof of the Merritt Perez dynasty's continued success, and, as I had predicted, their own cameras were out. Aubrey had her phone, of course, mounted on a small, discreet, and absurdly expensive gimbal. She was panning, capturing the atmosphere, but mostly, I knew, she was framing the shot for her own appearance in it. She was the documentarian of their legacy. I was not with them. I was on the dais, the elevated platform, seated in the front row with the university deans, the provost, and the other student award recipients. The heavy, recycled polyester academic gown was hot and suffocating, but underneath it, I was wearing my armor. The shark gray suit felt cool, sharp, and precise, and in the inner breast pocket, I could feel the stiff, sharp corner of my passport, the disownment letter, resting against my ribs. I had watched them arrive. I watched them scan the crowd, find me on the dais, and give a polite, distant wave. Lydia's eyes had scanned my face, and I saw her give a tiny, approving nod. She was pleased. Her problem daughter was on the stage, where she belonged, ready to be a part of their photograph. They were so ready for the show. The ceremony began. The speeches were long, the air grew heavier, the threat of rain becoming more real. The dean of students read the welcome address. The provost gave a speech about navigating the future. It was all a low, meaningless drone, and through it all, I could hear it, or rather, I could see it. Every few moments, Aubrey would raise her phone, her thumb tapping the screen. Click, 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 a snapshot of the crowd, a snapshot of her and her fiancé, smiling, a snapshot of our parents. It was the metronome of her world, the steady, rhythmic click of her documenting their perfect, curated reality. Then, Dean Richardson approached the podium, the warm, honey maple voice. And now, she said, her voice bright, we come to the special commencement honors. These awards are given to students who have not only excelled academically, but who have embodied the university's core mission of innovation, leadership, and community impact. This was it. Lydia's back straightened, if that was even possible. Graham's chin lifted. Aubrey's phone was up, steady, aimed right at the podium. This year, the dean continued, the faculty board and the board of trustees are proud to present the 2024 Technology and Innovation Leadership Award. She paused, beaming. The recipient is a student whose capstone project has already begun to make significant waves in the tech community, a true leader and a brilliant mind. Please join me in congratulating Ms. Natalia Perez. A wave of applause, as practiced, rippled through the 10,000 chairs. It was polite. It was respectful. It was the good job student applause. On the Jumbotron screens flanking the stage, the live feed camera panned, as expected, to the VIP row. I saw them. Lydia was clapping, her gloved hands moving with perfect, aristocratic grace, her smile a beacon of proud motherhood. Graham was nodding, a slow, satisfied nod. My asset is performing as expected. Aubrey's camera was locked on me, capturing the lovely moment. I stood up. My heart was a cold, steady engine. I waited. The dean held up a hand, laughing into the microphone. Please, but wait. That is actually only half of the story. The applause died down, replaced by a confused murmur. Aubrey's hands, I could see from the stage, faltered. My instructions to Leo and Mara echoed in my head. Don't watch me. Watch the MC. The dean's voice took on a new, electric tone. This was not the honey maple syrup. This was the announcement. We have been given special last-minute permission to share a truly stunning piece of news with the graduating class today. She leaned into the mic. The entire stadium was silent. We are, today, officially announcing that Cascade's own Root Weave, the capstone project developed by Ms. Perez and her team, has just finalized a landmark, multi-year, multi-million-dollar licensing partnership. A gasp from the business school graduates. With one of the largest and most powerful logistics corporations in North America, Orion Freight Systems. The sound that erupted from the crowd was not applause. It was a roar. It was the sound of money, of a real-world acquisition, of a story. The polite ripple became a tidal wave of genuine, shocked, explosive cheers. And that is still not all, the dean shouted over the noise, her own face flushed with the triumph of the announcement. In addition to this landmark deal, Orion Freight Systems has officially appointed Ms. Natalia Perez as the new founding director of data operations. The roar became a high-pitched scream. The business students were on their feet. The engineering students were on their feet. This was not a lovely award. This was a conquest. This was a number. And in that precise, perfect, chaotic moment, the university's live feed camera, the one broadcasting to the two massive jumbotrons, did exactly what it was trained to do. It panned away from the stage. It panned to the proud family in the front row VIP section to capture their ecstatic, celebratory reaction. But the faces it found were not ecstatic. They were frozen. My mother, Lydia, was the centerpiece. Her hands were still raised, mid-clap, but they had stopped moving. Her brilliant, gala smile was still on her face, but it was a grotesque, frozen mask. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, glassy with a horror so profound it had not yet registered as shock. She was a photograph of a woman, a perfect, polished doll whose mechanism had just instantly broken. My father, Graham, was no longer the patron. His smile was gone. He was gripping the thin, white, metal arms of his folding chair. He was gripping them so hard that his knuckles, even on the giant screen, were bone white. He was not looking at the stage. He was staring at the grass between his feet, his jaw working, his entire body rigid, as if he had just been physically struck from behind. And Aubrey. The metronome stopped. Her arm, the one holding the phone on its gimbal, was lowering, slowly, trembling, just slightly. Her face, the one that was always a mask of condescending pity or smug triumph, was utterly, beautifully, blank. The camera, her weapon, her documentarian, was pointing at the ground. She had stopped recording. Their frozen, shattered, Uncomprehending faces were 10 feet tall, broadcast for the entire university, for all their friends, for every trustee, for every one of their peers, to see. They were suspended in a perfect, public, high-definition moment of absolute, soul-stripping shock. This was the freeze. And as the stadium roared, and as their faces were plastered in silent, frozen horror for the world to see, I began to walk. I felt the cool, sharp wool of the gray suit under the heavy gown. I felt the sharp, legal edge of my passport, my disownment, in my pocket. I walked across the dais, my low black heels making no sound. I walked through the wall of noise. I walked through the silent, invisible, shattered fragments of their world. I reached the podium. The polished wood was smooth under my hands. The university logo, in polished brass, reflected the gray sky. I looked out. I did not look at the VIP row. I found Leo and Mara in the third row. They were on their feet, jumping, hugging, and sobbing. I found Professor Halden on the dais with me, and he was not smiling. He was giving me a single, sharp, proud nod. I leaned into the microphone. The sound of my breath was loud in the sudden, expectant hush. "Thank you, Dean," I said. My voice was calm. It was not triumphant. It was not angry. It was just mine. Thank you to the faculty, and to my team, Leo and Mara, who are the real heart of this. I paused. I let the silence stretch. I could feel the 10,000-person stare. I could feel the weight of the Jumbotron cameras. And I could feel the silent, gravitational pull of the 3 frozen figures in the front row. I want to especially thank, I said, my voice clear and steady, all the people in my life who told me I wasn't enough, a breath, a collective, sharp intake of air from the crowd. What did she just say? I let my eyes drift, just once, to the front row. I saw Lydia's head snap up, her frozen mask now cracking with dawning, fiery rage. I want to thank the people who told me I was unrealistic, I continued, my voice never rising. The people who told me my work was a hobby, a distraction, the ones who told me to just smile for the pictures and don't ruin the image. I looked straight ahead, at the sea of graduates, at my future. You taught me the single most valuable lesson of my career. You taught me how to stand up straight all by myself. The silence held for 1, 2, 3 seconds. It was a vacuum, and then the stadium erupted. It was not applause. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation, but it was different. It was the students. It was the thousands of kids who had felt not enough. It was the sound of genuine, cathartic, visceral recognition. It was not polite. It was not respectful. It was a primal shout of yes. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. And under that wave of sound, under that cover of 1,000-person ovation, I did not bow. I did not wave. I just gave a small, clean nod. Thank you. I turned, my back to the crowd, and I walked away from the podium. I walked back to my chair on the dais. I smoothed my gown, and I sat down. I did not look at them. I did not need to. Over the thunder of the applause, over the cheers, over the band, which was now starting to play, I could hear, as clearly as a bell in a silent room, the sound of their non-reaction. I could hear their silence. It was total. It was profound. And it was the sweetest sound in the world. The fallout was digital, immediate, and viral. The video of my mother's face, the frozen mask, as it was quickly dubbed by the merciless internet, was everywhere. A 10-second clip, looped endlessly on TikTok and Instagram, her clapping hands halting mid-air, her gala-ready smile shattering into something that looked like a Baroque painting of despair. It had 6 million views by Monday morning. The local business journals, the ones my father read religiously over his coffee, were less visual but far more damaging. The headline in the Puget Sound Business Times was brutal in its simplicity. From disowned to director, the 24-hour turnaround of Natalia Perez. The article, written by a reporter who had clearly done their homework, probably with a little help from the talkative angel investor, didn't explicitly mention the disownment paper, but it heavily implied a significant family rift that had backfired spectacularly on the Merritts. The impact on their curated world was swift. By Tuesday, I heard through the grapevine, mostly from delighted, gossipy former classmates who now worked as junior associates in my father's world, that the fallout was real. 3 major donors to my mother's foundation had quietly, but firmly, pulled their support for the upcoming autumn gala. They were reassessing their philanthropic alignments, which is rich people speak for, we don't want to be associated with a public relations disaster. My father's firm was getting nervous emails from clients. High net worth individuals do not like reputational risk. They pay Graham Merritt to be invisible and effective, not to be a viral meme about bad parenting. And Aubrey, poor perfect Aubrey, her fiancé, Mr. Right Bloodline, had apparently asked for a temporary postponement of the wedding date. The official reason given to their friends was unexpected work commitments. The real reason, which everyone knew, was that his family, the Right Bloodline people, found the current media circus unseemly and wanted to wait until the stench of scandal had blown over before merging their brand with ours. I watched all of this happen from my silent, empty apartment. I didn't feel the rush of vindictive glee I thought I might. I didn't feel the urge to call them and gloat. I just felt removed. It was like watching a demolition of a building I had moved out of years ago. I turned off my notifications. I stopped reading the articles. I had work to do. My first act as director of data operations was not a press release. It was quiet. I used a small portion of my signing bonus to seed the Root Weave mentorship program. It was a simple initiative, paid internships and genuine, hands-on mentorship for female engineering students from non-traditional backgrounds. No GPA requirements, no pedigree checks, just raw talent and a willingness to work. We didn't announce it. We just sent emails to the community college computer science departments. While I was building, Nadia was finalizing our leverage. She came to my new office on Wednesday. It was a real office now. A corner suite in the Orion building on Pier 94, with the same stunning view of the Sound that Kincaid had. The dossier is complete, she said, sliding a thick black folder across my desk. It was the evidence from Leo's honeypot, the logs, the trace routes, the definitive, cryptographic proof that a computer inside the offices of Kincaid, Strauss, and Meyer specifically, from the subnetwork assigned to junior partners, had attempted to illegally access and steal our proprietary code. What do you want to do with it? Nadia asked. We could go to the police. This is a felony. We could go to the press. It would bury Aubrey's fiancé. His career would be over before lunch. I looked at the folder. It was a nuclear option. It would destroy Aubrey's life. It would finish the job the viral video had started. No police, no press, I said. Then what? We send it to their internal compliance officer, I said, calm and certain. Just one copy, with a note. We believe this was an unauthorized action by a rogue employee. We trust you will handle this internally to ensure it never happens again. We consider this matter closed, provided no further irregularities occur. Nadia smiled. A slow, wicked thing. You're not just burying him, you're putting him on a leash. He'll keep his job, but he'll never make full partner. He'll be toxic, and he'll know that you know. Exactly, I said. It's more efficient. That evening, when I got back to my apartment, there was an envelope on my doormat. It wasn't mailed. It had been hand-delivered. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery. I recognized the scent of my mother's perfume before I even touched it. I picked it up and went inside. I didn't open it right away. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window, watching the ferries. Then I opened it. It was a handwritten letter from both of them. It was long, rambling, and filled with words like misunderstanding, heat of the moment, and deep, enduring love. It ended with a plea. No matter what happened, no matter what papers were signed in haste, "You are still our daughter. We want to fix this. We can move past this together." They wanted a truce. They wanted the viral video to stop. They wanted their donors back. They wanted absolution without accountability. I didn't write a letter back. I didn't call. I took out my phone and sent a single text message to the family group chat, which I briefly unmuted for this one purpose. "I have received your letter. I appreciate the sentiment. However, I choose to respect the legal document you both signed and delivered to me at Maison d'Écume. I take that contract very seriously. I consider our business concluded." Then I remuted the chat. Permanently. I put on my coat and went for a walk along the waterfront. The air was cold and smelled of brine and diesel. I listened to the deep, resonant horn of a container ship leaving the port, heading out to the open ocean. It was a lonely sound, but it was also a sound of immense freedom. I was alone. I had no family to fall back on, no safety net of merit money or influence. I was just me, Natalia Perez, standing on a pier in the rain. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel the frantic, desperate need to be something else. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't even need their apology. I had my work. I had my team. I had my own name. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email from Reed Kincaid. Subject: internal keynote. Body: Natalia. The board has been watching how you handled the last week. The silence, the focus. It's rare. I want you to give the keynote at our next all-hands executive retreat. Topic: leading through quiet. Let me know if you accept. I looked at the email. I looked out at the dark water. I typed back. Accepted. See you Monday. I put the phone away and kept walking. The rain was getting heavier, but I didn't mind. I didn't even put up my hood. I just let it fall, washing everything clean. The Frozen Mask video and the "Disowned to Director" headline had one immediate, predictable effect. My family panicked. Their entire world, built on the flawless facade of public perception, was cracking. And when their world cracks, they do not call a therapist. They call a public relations firm, and then they call in their markers. The summons came not from them, but from the university. A week after graduation, a highly confidential email from Dean Richardson's office landed in my inbox. The subject was, "Request for private mediation." They were using the university as their stage for a counteroffensive. They weren't just my family, they were the Merritt Perez family. Major donors, figures on boards, a name the university did not want to have a public feud with. They were calling a private meeting, framed as a reconciliation, to correct the profound misunderstanding from the graduation. They wanted to fix the narrative. I agreed. I told Nadia she should be there. The meeting was held not in an office, but in one of the university's heritage rooms, a dark, wood-paneled, oppressive space designed to make you feel small. It smelled of old carpet, furniture polish, and stale, important decisions. My family was already there when we arrived. This was their setup. They were seated on one side of a massive, polished mahogany table, arranged like a royal family sitting for a portrait of grief. Graham, Lydia, and Aubrey. They looked smaller. The viral spotlight had drained their color. On their side of the table, 2 university representatives, including Dean Richardson, looking profoundly uncomfortable, and their family lawyer, a man I had seen at Christmas parties my whole life. On my side, me and Nadia. "Natalia," Dean Richardson began, her honey maple voice strained with the tension. "Thank you for coming. Your parents have expressed a deep desire to clear the air. There seems to have been a terrible mix-up regarding that envelope." "A mix-up," Lydia said, her voice a low, wounded tremor. She was performing. This was her grieving mother role, one she had never used before. "Natalia, darling, we are horrified. We don't know how that dreadful document ended up in your possession," Graham chimed in, his voice the rumble of paternal authority. "It was a misunderstanding. Natalia, a hypothetical document, a draft, part of a discussion about your future. It was never meant to be given to you. Certainly not like that." Their lawyer nodded. Indeed, a clerical error, a piece of paper that was, unfortunately, misplaced. We are here today to formally rescind it and to affirm the Merritt family's unwavering support for Natalia. They had their story. It was a good one, plausible, clean, and it painted them as the victims of a simple, tragic mistake. I looked at Nadia. Nadia just smiled. A clerical error, Nadia said, her voice, by contrast, clean and sharp as a scalpel. That's a fascinating theory. She placed her leather briefcase on the table and clicked it open. In that case, you won't mind if we clarify the metadata. She pulled out her laptop, opened it, and swiveled the screen to face them. This, she said, is a digitally scanned copy of the Disownment paper, the one Natalia has in her possession, and this is the metadata from the law firm that drafted it. Your law firm, Mr. Merritt. Their lawyer's face went pale. It shows the document was finalized and signed, Nadia continued, her finger tapping the screen. Not hypothetically, but with a verified digital signature from both Mr. and Mrs. Merritt. The timestamp on that signature is, let's see, 7:04 p.m. on the night of the dinner at Maison de Cum, roughly 1 hour before you handed it to her. This wasn't a clerical error. It was a scheduled, premeditated, and time-stamped execution. The silence in the wood-paneled room was absolute. Dean Richardson's face was a mask of polite horror. She had been used. Lydia's grieving mother face dissolved. The mask fell, and underneath was the cold, hard fury I had seen in the Jumbotron. "How dare you?" Lydia whispered. "This is a family. You made it a public matter." "Mrs. Merritt," Nadia said, her voice still quiet. "When you weaponized a university event to manage your daughter, we're just clarifying the facts." "This is not," my father said, his voice a low growl, "about metadata. This is about a child who has forgotten her duty, a child who built this toy, and thinks it makes her an adult." "A toy," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. I unzipped my own bag. I pulled out my laptop. "You're right, Father," I said. "This isn't about metadata. This isn't about that paper. That paper." I gestured to Nadia's screen. "Is history. It's a closed contract. I already accepted the terms." I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life. I didn't open a document. I opened a web browser. I turned the screen around. On it was a live, glowing, dynamic map of the Pacific Northwest, the root-weave dashboard. It was covered in hundreds of tiny, moving, color-coded dots. "This," I said, my voice as calm and steady as the data feed itself, "is my 9:04 a.m. meeting. This is a live, real-time surge test of the Orion Freight Systems regional network. Those red dots are independent contractors in Portland, running my fairness protocol. Those green dots are Orion long-haul trucks being dynamically rerouted, by my algorithm, around a new accident on I-5. Right now, this toy is managing $3.2 million of active, in-transit freight." I looked at them, all of them. "This is not a lesson from you. This is not a hobby. This is not a misunderstanding. This is the work I chose, and it's the work I am doing." No one spoke. The only sound in the room was the faint click of my laptop's fan and the quiet whoosh of the live updating dots on the screen. The heavy wooden door of the heritage room opened. Everyone startled. Reed Kincaid walked in. He was not on the guest list. He was in his usual armor, a dark, simple suit, no tie. He looked at the room, at the assembled lawyers, at my parents, and at me, and his face was granite. "Dean," he said, nodding to Richardson. "Sorry I'm late. I was invited as a guest of honor." He walked, with his long, ground-covering stride, and stood, not at the table, but behind me. He looked down at my parents. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just spoke one, clean, quiet sentence. "At Orion Freight Systems, dignity is a job requirement." My father, Graham Merritt, a man who had not been publicly challenged by another man in my entire lifetime, stiffened. The blood rose in his neck. He was a man who only had one weapon, and he drew it. "I don't know who you think you are," my father said, his voice shaking with restrained rage. "But I manage the portfolios of men who could buy your trucking company 10 times over. This is a family matter." I didn't let Kincaid answer. I stood up. I looked at my father, and for the first time, I just felt sorry for him. His weapon was so old, so blunt. "I know you do, Dad," I said, my voice gentle. "Your world is built on who you sit with, on the value of the chair. My world is different." I looked him in the eye. "I measure value by impact, not by seating arrangements." Lydia saw the battle was lost. She saw the dean's face. She saw Kincaid. She saw the glowing laptop. The war was over. So she tried, one last time, to negotiate a surrender that looked like a victory. "Enough," she said, her voice suddenly high, theatrical, and desperate. She stood up. "All of this business, it's tearing us apart, Natalia. Please, we can fix this. We can do a joint interview, a photo. We can tell the world this was all a misunderstanding. We can show them a united front. We can heal. Publicly. Heal. The last, most desperate word in her arsenal. "No," I said. It was not unkind. It was just final. "Healing isn't a performance, Mother. It's not a press conference. It's a repeated, daily discipline, and it's something you do in private." The fight went out of them. All at once, Lydia sank back into her chair. Graham just stared at the polished table, and then Aubrey, quiet Aubrey, the documentarian, she, who had not spoken a word, looked up at me. Her face was pale. There was no camera. There was no smirk. "I'm sorry, Natalia," she whispered. Just those 3 words. It was so quiet I barely heard it, but it was the only real thing they had said all day. I nodded at her, once. "Thank you for not filming this," I said, and then I reached into my bag. I pulled out the original envelope, the heavy, cream-colored, crepe paper. "We disown Natalia Perez." I slid it across the mahogany, polished-smelling table. It stopped, perfectly, in front of my father. "You should keep this," I said. My voice was clean, no malice, just an auditor closing a file. "I've accepted the terms. It's yours. Keep it, as a reminder of what not to do again." I closed my laptop. Nadia closed hers. The meeting was over. "Natalia," Reed Kincaid said, his voice a quiet rumble by my ear. "If you're finished here, I have something to show you. In the next hall." I nodded. I turned, with Nadia, and we walked, with Kincaid, out of that dark, polished, suffocating room. We left them there, silent, with the envelope sitting between them. We walked out of the heritage room and into the adjacent banquet hall, which was bright, loud, and full of life. It was a reception, filled with students, press, and university faculty. "What is this?" I asked Reed. "This," he said, "is the real announcement. A university MC, the same one from the graduation, stepped up to a podium at the front of the room. 'Thank you all for coming,' she said, her voice booming. 'Cascade University and Orion Freight Systems are thrilled to announce a new $10 million endowment.'" My head snapped toward Reed. He just looked straight ahead. "The Build Your Own Table Scholarship Fund, a joint partnership between Orion Freight Systems and Root Weave." The room erupted in applause. "This fund," the MC continued, "will be dedicated to supporting student founders, like its namesake, who are building the next generation of ethical, impactful, and innovative technology. And to present the first inaugural scholarships, please welcome back to the stage the founder of Root Weave, Ms. Natalia Perez." The crowd, my classmates, the press, my future. They were all on their feet, clapping, cheering. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Reed Kincaid just nudged my elbow. "Go on, director. That's your cue." I began to walk toward the stage, and as I did, I looked to my left. Through the tall, glass-paned doors that separated the two halls, I could see them, my family. They were still sitting in that dark, wood-paneled room. They hadn't moved. They were just three small, dark, silent figures, trapped in an empty, polished box. They were looking at me, but I was in the light, and they were in the shadow. They were tiny. They were a world away. I turned away from the glass. I turned toward the lights, the stage, the noise, the work. I stepped up to the podium. The applause was a wave. I took a breath. I looked at the crowd. I looked at Leo and Mara, who were in the front row, crying and cheering. I leaned into the mic, and I said the only thing that was left to say, the only thing I had learned. "When you stop asking for permission to belong," I said, "you will finally belong to yourself." The music swelled. The lights came up. On the giant screen behind me, it wasn't my face. It was a live feed from a camera on the waterfront, a big, white, beautiful ferry, pulling away from the dock, its horn blasting as it headed out, unburdened, unhesitating, into the wide, gray, open water. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from. Let's connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.